I'm Frank LoSchiavo. I teach statistics courses at Ohio University, and in this video I'm going to talk about how to pass a statistics class. The first thing you need to do is find the right professor, and what you should do is talk to some other students and just ask them, who did you have for stat class? In general, you want to find an experienced professor who's well respected and has a reputation of being fair and friendly. I've been teaching statistics for a few decades now, and I'll tell you that experience is really important. I've spent a lot of time thinking about statistics and just as much time thinking about how to communicate that information clearly to students who don't necessarily have a background in mathematics. Once you find the right professor, you're going to want to talk to that professor. And the first thing you want to ask them is the textbook necessary? And the reason why you want to ask that question is because sometimes lectures and handouts might be sufficient. For example, in my class, I give handouts that accompany every single lecture. And everything that I need to convey to you about statistics is in those lectures and in those handouts. And that's nice because it helps students focus. Now, let's be clear. Those handouts, those lectures might be sufficient, but there are many instructors who rely on many other things that are in textbooks. For example, in all statistics textbooks, there are tables. Now, I give these tables to my students in class, but some of the tables that are in the books, the instructors rely you, the student, to bring to class. So for example, here's a Z table, there are T tables, there are F tables, there are lots of different tables, and you'll need access to those tables. Also, textbooks have lots of practice exercises and review sections, and if you think you're going to use those sections as study tools, then you should probably buy a textbook. Keep this in mind too. A lot of students don't buy textbooks because they don't have the money, and that's really not a good excuse for not having a textbook. And that's because older editions of statistics textbooks are usually really good, cheap alternatives to the current version. Let me give you an example. For students who are interested in a textbook, I use this particular book, and it's the 9th edition, the most current edition. But if students wanted to save money, I would absolutely recommend they look for the 8th edition or the 7th edition, because not much changes very quickly in statistics, and any one of those editions would be just fine. And that 7th edition you can find right now for probably $10-20. So money's really not an issue. Bottom line is this: if you're in doubt about whether or not you need a textbook for your statistics class, buy the textbook and buy an older edition if you want to save a lot of money. You also want to talk to your professor about what type of calculator he or she recommends. In class, you'll be able to use your cell phone, but keep in mind on an exam, you probably won't be able to use a cell phone because your phone is a communications device and it's easy to cheat with a communications device. So you're going to need some other type of calculator. Although you can use a very basic, very simple calculator, I really recommend, and your professor might recommend, that you spend just a little bit more money on a calculator that can do some basic statistical functions. One like this is something that I use in class. It's very helpful, and it just costs like $15. So you'll really want to think about that. Spend some time getting comfortable with it. It is one of the primary tools that you'll be using for homework and for exams. You want to make sure you know how to use it. If your instructor is doing something in class and you weren't exactly sure how they did that with their calculator, after class, just go up and ask your instructor what they did. These instructors are stat geeks, and they'll be very happy to teach you the tricks that they do with their calculator. Spend some time getting comfortable with your calculator. That's a really important tip. Once you talk to your professor about those two things, talk to your classmates. And during that very first week of classes, just pipe up before class and ask, hey, who's interested in forming a study group? My experience is that when it comes to students, a group of 4 is ideal. And that's because with 4 students, you've got a good mix of students who are stronger and students who are weaker. So, the stronger students can help the weaker students. And when you schedule a study session, there's always going to be someone who doesn't show up. So if you start with 4 students, you're likely to end up with at least 2 or 3. And 2 is really all you need. As long as you have a study buddy, you're really going to help yourself out, because there's going to be something simple that you didn't quite understand, and your study buddy is going to understand it and can teach it to you. And the same thing is going to work from the other side. Your study buddy's not going to understand something. You probably do understand it, and then you can teach him or her. And by teaching someone, it helps you understand the material even better. But keep this in mind. Your study buddy is only going to be able to help you so much. If you think you're going to need some additional help, at this point, very early in the course, you want to start to explore your other tutoring options, professional tutoring options. Most campuses have some type of student success center where you can get some professional tutoring, or maybe even just peer tutoring. And we're talking about peer tutors who have already taken the course and who have excelled in the course. Make sure you explore those options now and get involved with the tutor now if you think you're going to need the help later on. Let's talk about some strategies that you should engage in while inside class, while class is actually going on. Things move pretty quickly in a college-level statistics class, so you need to attend every class. If you're watching this video because you're worried about passing a statistics class, trust me, you need to attend every single class. And the reason why I mention this is your statistics class will start off relatively easy because all statistics courses begin by talking about basic descriptive statistics. You'll talk about central tendency. Here we're talking about computing mean, median, and mode. This is really simple stuff. And basic measures of variability, like computing standard deviation. These are things that are relatively simple, and you might start to think that that statistics class is going to be easy, and you might start to think that you don't need to come to class every day. You will be wrong if you think those things, because quite quickly you will move from descriptive statistics into inferential statistics. And when you start talking about inferential statistics, you'll be focusing on probability and hypothesis testing. You're going to learn how to do z-tests, t-tests, f-tests, r-tests, chi-square tests, all types of tests. And they really require practice and a lot of thought, so you need to come to every class. During class, make sure you take careful, complete notes. And if you have questions about any of the material, make sure you muster the strength to speak up. And in fact, you should talk to your friends and let them know, hey, whenever you've got a question, speak up. I don't want to be the only one. What you're trying to do is establish a norm in your class where when people are confused, they will ask questions. Because I guarantee you, students are going to be confused in a stat class. It's just the nature of the beast. But if you ask the question right at that point, you can get a nice, simple answer, hopefully from your instructor, and then everybody understands and you can move on. So definitely ask questions whenever you have them. Let's talk about some strategies outside of class. You need to study and practice statistical problems regularly. And I really want to focus on that word need. The point is, you can do some work in class and you can hear your instructor talk about statistics, but until you actually start working on it on your own, practicing, you're not going to really get it. So this is a very important component. You should strive for 3 levels of understanding. Let me talk about them really quickly and then we'll go through an example. 1 level of understanding. Be sure to understand all statistical problems conceptually. Another thing, be sure to understand all statistical problems mathematically. In other words, how to compute them. And then finally, be sure that you understand all statistical problems in terms of how you can interpret them. Let's go through a real quick example so you know what I mean. Here are the 3 things I just talked about. Let's say I ask you as an instructor on an exam or otherwise to compute a standard deviation based on those 5 values right there. First of all, you need to understand this problem conceptually. You need to understand what it means to compute the standard deviation. So at that point, you should be saying to yourself, standard deviation is a measurement of variability. It uses the mean as a baseline. So you've got a sense of what a standard deviation is conceptually. Based on that conceptual understanding, you should be able to pick the appropriate formula. And the formula is going to look like this. And then you should understand how to compute it mathematically. So take some time to be able to work through all of the formulas you've learned in class. Then once you find an answer, you have to make sure you know how to interpret the results. So in this case, the standard deviation of those values is 2.45. And the way I would interpret it is, on average, those raw scores, those raw values, differ from the sample mean by about 2.45 points. So you can see it is a measure of variability. If you can understand the data at those 3 levels, if you can understand basic statistics at those 3 levels, you're doing pretty well. You're going to pass your stat class. Keep this in mind too. Once you learn how to compute a problem and interpret a problem, all that your instructor can do is give you different numbers on an exam. So I'm not going to give you the same values, I'll give you some different values, but the point is you compute everything exactly the same way and you interpret everything exactly the same way. This should give you a lot of confidence. If you can master this problem right there that we did in class or that we did for homework, then you should be able to master this problem with this data on the upcoming exam. Speaking of exams, let's talk about some strategies before exams. First thing, which is very important, is you should schedule your study time. So pull out your planner if it's paper-based, open up your planning program if it's computer-based or based on your phone, and actually write in some time for studying your statistics. If you schedule it, you're more likely to actually do it. Here's another strategy. Make sure you master your tools. We already talked about getting comfortable with your calculator. That shouldn't be any problem. Also make sure you get comfortable and you can master the formula sheet. A good instructor is going to share the formula sheet with you before the exam. All of mine are posted online at the beginning of the course, so students at any point can look at the formula sheet. You need to be sure that you can read that formula sheet, understand all of the formulas and how to compute them. It's really your most important tool. It's your best friend on an exam. Get to know it before the exam starts. Here's another tip. Familiarize yourself with each key concept. Definitions only get you so far in many classes, but in a statistics class, knowing some basic definitions actually gets you a pretty long way. Here are some of the key bolded terms from just one chapter in my statistics textbook. A student needs to be able to identify every one of those concepts, define it kind of in their own words, and understand in general what each concept represents. If you can do that, then you can respond to questions about those concepts. If you don't understand the basic language that we're talking about in class, the key terms that we're talking about in class, there's no way that you can respond intelligently to questions that I would ask on an exam. One thing you'll notice too is that several of the key terms are very similar and you need to be able to tease them apart. And I've highlighted a couple. Like, what's the difference between an independent and a dependent variable? They sound very similar, but they mean very different things. Focus on things like that and be sure you can tease them apart. And finally, and probably most important, compute some sample problems from scratch in an authentic testing situation. And this is what I mean by that. Get some of the problems, for example, that you worked out in class and rewrite them, or find some problems from your textbook and write them out. And then give yourself a formula sheet and a quiet room and see if you can work them out from scratch by hand. If you can do that at home in an authentic testing situation, meaning all that you have is a formula sheet and a calculator, then you're probably going to be able to do it on the exam. That's my key point. If you perform well on your simulated exam, you're probably going to perform well on the actual exam. And here's probably the more important corollary to that. If you don't perform well on your simulated exam, you're probably not going to perform well on the actual exam. And at that point that you discover that, you'll realize you either need more practice, or you need to talk to your study buddy, or you need to go visit your tutor, or you need to go visit your professor. But the bottom line is you will have determined that you don't have enough skill to do well on the exam and you need to do something about it. It's better to learn that before the exam than after the exam. Hey, good luck, and may the odds ever be in your favor.